right, good morning. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Honourable members, at the committee of January 18th, 2022, the committee agreed that at the beginning of each meeting we would observe a moment of silent reflection to commemorate the lives lost in Alberta due to drug poisoning, overdoses, and to the illness of addiction. So we will take that moment now. Once we figure out what that noise is.
That's Tammy, if you can mute and unmute.
You could mute and unmute, that would be helpful. I meant Emily Yao. There we go. There we go. Perfect. All right. We will observe a moment of silence now. Thank you. All right, thank you, members. Welcome, members and staff in attendance to the meeting of the Select Special Committee to examine safe supply. My name is Jeremy Nixon, and I'm the MLA for Calgary-Klein and chair of this committee. I'd now like to ask members and those joining the committee at the table to introduce themselves to the record, starting to my right with the deputy chair.
Good morning, Tracy Allard, MLA for Grand Prairie and deputy chair of the committee.
Good morning, Michaela Fry, MLA for Brooks Medicine Hat.
MLA Nicholas Milliken, Calgary Curry.
Good morning, Mickey Amory, Calgary Cross.
Good morning, I'm Trafton Koenig with the Parliamentary Council Office.
Good morning, Nancy Robert, Clerk of Journals and Committees.
Good morning, Aaron Roth, Committee Clerk.
All right, now I'd like to invite MLAs joining us online to introduce themselves to the record, starting with MLA Yao.
Tammy Yao, Fort McMurray Wood Buffalo.
Excellent, and MLA Stefan?
Jason Stefan, MLA Red Deer South.
Thank you. A few housekeeping items to address before we turn to the business at hand. Please note that microphones are operated by Hansard staff. Committee proceedings are live streamed on the internet and broadcast on Alberta Assembly TV. The audio and video stream and transcripts of meetings can be accessed via the Legislative Assembly website. Those participating by video conference are encouraged to please turn on your camera while speaking and mute your microphone when you're not speaking. Members participating virtually who wish to be placed on a speakers list are asked to email or send a message in the group chat to the committee clerk, and members in the room are asked to please signal the chair. Please set your cell phones and other devices to silent for the duration of this meeting. Up next is the approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda? Excellent. Emily Allard moves that the agenda for June 7th, 2022 meeting of the Select Special Committee to examine safe supply be adopted as distributed. All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed, please say no. Everyone online in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any online opposed, please say no. Perfect, that is carried. Approval of the minutes for March 25th, 2022. We have the minutes for March 25th, 2022 meeting of the committee. Are there any errors or omissions to note? All right, if not, would a member be willing to move that the minutes for the March 25th, 2022 meeting of the Select Special Committee to examine safe supply be adopted as circulated? Excellent. MLA Amory has moved. All in favor, please say aye, online and in the room. Aye. Any opposed, please say no, online and in the room. Excellent, that is carried. Honourable members, at the March 25th, 2022 meeting, the committee tasked Research Services with preparing a summary of issues and proposals that the committee heard from the technical briefings, oral presentations, and written submissions received in relation to our review of the elements contained in the committee's mandate. The summary documents were posted to the committee's internal website on April 1st, 2022. I would now like to invite Dr. Sarah Amato from the Legislative Assembly Office Research Services to provide the committee with an overview of the issue and proposal summary. Good morning, Dr. Amato. Good to see you.
Good morning. I hope you all have a copy of the issues document. I will just provide a very high-level summary of it. The document is a summary of issues and proposals brought to the attention of the committee by stakeholders and members of the public, and I'll just go over the different sections in it. So Section 2 suggests how to use the document. Section 3 is an executive summary that begins on page 2, and the issues and proposals are listed in Section 4. Those issues and proposals are grouped under 3 main categories: opposition to the provision of safe supply, support for the provision of safe supply, and then other recommendations for the committee's consideration. The notes column in Section 4 contains references to additional information provided by submitters where applicable. And then I'll just also note for your attention that the document is intended to assist the committee only as it engages in the deliberation process. Committee members can, of course, decide the order in which to consider proposals, and indeed may wish to pursue other issues related to the provision of safe supply that were not brought forward by by stakeholders, organizations, or members of the public. That concludes my summary, and I hope it's somewhat helpful to your process.
Excellent. Thank you, Doctor. Any questions? Emily Milliken.
Yeah, I have a question with regards to this document, and I just want to get it on the record as to whether or not, I think that the individual member mentioned that this was for the purposes of committee deliberations and not really for public consumption or something along those lines. This document, does it end up being attached to future minutes and does it become public? I'm seeing the clerk is nodding yes, is that correct? Okay, so I looked at this, and full disclosure, I was pretty disappointed in what I was reading. And what I mean by that is it just seemed completely unbalanced relative to what we actually, or what I experienced anyways. So just coming from my own perspective, we had, I believe, 21 individuals, stakeholders come out for one side, and the representations within this document of their summaries and issues is about, I'd say, 1 page. And then we had one stakeholder come out, according to this document, supposedly in support of safe supply as an intervention. And that one stakeholder, which represented about 1/4 of 1 of 3 days, or maybe 1/6 of 1 of 3 full days of testimony, has 4 pages. And I'm trying to just find balance in this. I'm not saying that what is written here necessarily is, well, there is one part that is actually wrong, but most of it, I just don't. Basically, what I'm looking for is balance. If we're going to try to do, the work of ensuring that we have the best recommendations. And if we were using this as a guide, it would be wholly unsatisfactory relative to how many stakeholders we actually had come forward. So it was 21 against 1 for, according to this. What I would say, though, is with regards to the 1 for, which were 3 doctors, I believe, Dr. Warren, Mogus, and Gosh, and they were stated in here. It states that they represent the Alberta Medical Association. They clearly did not, and they said so themselves. So that's one issue. Then I don't even think that, based on what they said, that we could even say that they represented the views of the addiction medicine section of the AMA. They specifically said that within that section, small section of the AMA more broadly, there are physicians on both sides of this issue, some for and some dead against. I'm not sure if it's quite verbatim, but that's basically what they said. And then not only that, with regard, so I wouldn't say that they could represent that if they're even saying that their own views as to how they came to us with a presentation was a relative and what I think they called pragmatic view of what they thought maybe some people within, or a conglomerate of the doctors within that sort of wing of the AMA may or may not actually state. So yeah, so I think that it's hard to say that they represent the AMA or even that aspect of it. And then with regards to whether or not they support, I don't think that that's quite right. I think what maybe Research Services has to do is to create a third section. one where it's more of just maybe not for or against, somewhere in the middle. I think that their specific statement, one of the doctors, perhaps it was Ghosh, said, we don't know enough on this intervention, referring to safer supply, and we need to study it. So I think with those kind of statements, it's hard to accept that they were for it when they purely are saying that they just need to study it. So what I was kind of, I would just hope that maybe we could, I don't know if, I don't know what the precedent for this would be, but like to go back to the drawing board and have something that I think would be a more balanced representation. Like we've got people talking to us about how there could be future class actions, and I don't see that anywhere on this. So just thoughts for the committee, I guess.
Excellent. Dr. Amato, do you want to comment? From committee members? Oh, sorry, Doctor.
I don't particularly have a response.
Okay. Any other members want to comment? Sure. Yeah, MLA Allard.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I would concur with my colleague. I think this is obviously a tender topic. And, you know, I think we said at the very beginning we're going to take a posture of curiosity and you know, really listen to understand what the research indicates and what we know so far. And I think a number of the presenters indicated that we don't know enough, or that they're interested in, or that we need to study this more. And so I felt that some of the commentary or some of the summary, and particularly given that we'll go public, may be misleading. I'm sure that wasn't the intent whatsoever. But I would want to have caution in how it's presented to the public, given that a number of the presenters were simply saying, you know, we need more information or we need to study this more. And that being said, the lion's share of presenters that came to the committee were concerned about moving forward with safe supply. So I'll just leave my comments there, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Excellent. Any other members that would like to comment? Dr. Maslin.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to comment, Mr. Chair, on something that the Honourable Mrs. Allard said. It's this document is not being presented to the public, just unless the committee wishes it to be so, right? It's not a public document. The final report will be, though. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Emily Fry.
You can put Milliken ahead of me. I think
Emily
I have a
Milliken.
question.
Sorry, Dr. Maslin. I guess just for some clarity, I believe it was the clerk who stated that this would become a public document. Is that true or not true? As attached to the minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Milliken. Yes, it would be, but it's not as though, first of all, that's down the road. It's not being public right now, and this is just a working document. That's the intent of this document. And it's also there to use as members wish. It's not a representation of the committee's views per se. It's a representation of the stakeholders and members of the public, as I think you know. But so it will be attached to the minutes, and it will be accessible through a request through the legislature library, if a member of the public so chooses. It won't be posted on the website unless this committee wishes it to be so. So it's public, but it's not going to be necessarily easily accessible. Thank you.
Is that Emily Fry?
I have concerns with, I don't know, it seems as though we are doing directly what we cannot do indirectly. I don't know, like we're saying that the document's not public, so we shouldn't have to worry about, but it's still publicly acceptable, or publicly accessible, which means it's public. And I think we should, as a committee, our part of our mandate was to examine this issue in the public sphere and to allow the public to weigh in and have their perspective heard. So for us to be putting out anything, I would want it to be publicly accessible personally, because I think what we've done in this committee is important work, and the perspectives that we have heard are perspectives that the public needs to hear, because they're evidence-based and based on high quality medical evidence that you are not seeing elsewhere. And I think Alberta is really a leader on this. But my concern is when we get down into the nitty-gritty of this report, that it is not representative of what we heard at the committee. Like Mr. Milliken said, I was shocked to see that the AMA supported safe supply in this report when that is expressly what they said about 15 different ways to Sunday in their comments that they did not support. They said they did not speak on behalf of the AMA. So I was surprised to see that. I think that our words matter. The phraseology of these things matter. I understand that there's never any malintent in here, but we do need to clean this up if it is to go public. I think having it as something that you have to the library to request is a detail that I'm not really interested in personally. I'd rather see the report be what it's intended to be and reflective of the submissions to the committee before having to be fixed. We are, I think we can do better than this.
Excellent. Any other members want to comment? All right. So we're going to proceed to the next step within our discussion, or is there something more formal we want to do here with this? Emily Allard?
Thank you, Chair. I may just have a process question. Given that there is some debate about the summary, although I'm sure it was done with the best intent, I wonder if there's a way for it to not be part of the minutes or the public record. I don't know if that's an option, but maybe that would solve the concerns being raised at the committee level until it's redrafted. Is that something we can consider, given the feedback from the committee this morning?
Yes.
Excellent. Do I need to make a motion to that end?
That would need to be a motion, yeah.
Okay, perfect. I will be happy to put forward a motion that we request a redraft of the research and that it not be attached to the minutes until the committee approves the redraft. Is that an acceptable motion?
Ms.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that all I would say at this point is if the committee would like research services to review the submissions and the presentations again, to ensure that all recommendations that were made that were within the scope and mandate of the committee are reflected in the issues document, that perhaps would be an appropriate motion, if that makes sense.
It could be, Mr. Chair, or do we want to just, well, my only concern is that we land in the same spot again. I just want to make sure that the feedback of the committee is being considered as we look at what the presenters actually said in terms of the balance and the scope of what was presented at the committee. Perhaps upon review that would be the case. Does anybody else have any comments?
Any further comments on that then? Mr. Cohen?
If I just caught Member Allard's comments there, was whether we could hold back on attaching that initial draft to the minutes. And I believe if that's incorporated into the motion, the committee clerk may have some draft wording if it reflects your intent, but I think if the committee wishes by motion to ask that report not be attached to the minutes until a revised version is prepared, I think that seems quite possible.
Would it be helpful to get it in writing on the board here? And while we do that, maybe get MLA Yao to comment?
Thank you very much. I was just going to concur with my colleagues. I look at this document, and my apologies, this was the first time looking at the document, but it does seem unbalanced compared to what the information that we received was. And I was just wondering if Dr. Amato could provide an explanation of that, how to us on how I feel like there's some parts missing to the under the opposition to the provision of safe supply. One big question was around that term safe supply, and that's not even commented on here as an example. And I'm just wondering if Dr. Amato could provide some explanations.
Dr. Amato?
The discussion of the term safer supply is under other comment section 3. I'm not entirely sure. I wrote this some time ago, so I would be remiss to go into the detail of what was said under Section 3. All I can say is that I'm hearing the concerns of the committee, and that I'm sorry the committee is disappointed in the document. I have no, my job is merely as a research officer to reflect what it is that I read in the transcripts and in the submissions. So maybe I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you, Dr. Amato, for your comments. MLA Milliken.
I would just like to go on the record and say no apology needed at all. I think all we're just looking for is just to see a bit more balance with regards to, we put a lot of effort into those 3 days, listening to a lot of really important stakeholders, and I just wanted to make sure that they were also well represented too. So again, we do not in any way, shape, or form expect that there was any malice or anything along those lines. There is no reason for you to apologize, and ultimately we do thank you for everything that you do, and hopefully in a bit of a redo, we might end up with something that I think the committee will be excited to have. So thank you.
This may end up being a good segue into our deliberation conversation. So if we can throw that motion up, and then we will clarify, MLA Allard, if this is what you were intending and are happy with.
Yeah, I think that is representative. I just wanted to clarify one thing, though. To be fair to the good doctor, who, again, no apology required whatsoever, you mentioned that you are summarizing what you read. Does that include the oral submissions, or no? Maybe that's the sticky point here.
Oh,
Yeah, she's nodding.
mute.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, then I think that wording reflects my intent.
Excellent. Would you like to move that for the record?
Sure, so I'm happy to move that the Select Special Committee to examine safe supply, direct research services to review the submissions and presentations to ensure that the issues and proposals summary document reflects the recommendations that were made in submissions and presentations received by the committee, and that the document not be attached to the meeting minutes until the revised version of the document has been approved by the chair.
Excellent. Hearing the motion, is there any further discussion? MLA Fry?
Yeah, I just want to add some clarifying comments here. I 100% support the motion brought forward by Member Allard. My concern is not with the motion. I just want to make sure that the public knows the reason why we are asking for a redraft of this motion, or this document, is because we believe that there are maybe some errors in the document. Now, I think the concern that I can already imagine people are wondering is, well, why don't you want us to see it? Well, for us as a committee, our job is to make sure that we are accurately representing the views of the stakeholders who have brought forward expert information. And I want to make it very clear to Albertans that I have every intention, and so does this committee, to ensure that we are bringing a fulsome document forward. So there is no, and that there will be something brought forward. This is just not it.
Thank you, Emily Fry. Any further comments? All right, hearing and seeing none, I will ask for everybody joining us in the room and online, if they are in favor of this motion, to please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Please say no. All right, hearing none, that motion is carried. Perfect. Well, thank you, Dr. Amato, and we will now move on to the next section of our meeting, Section 5. Honourable members, before we begin our deliberations, I would like to remind committee members that committee did receive 3 additional pieces of correspondence since our last meeting. The first 2 were written submissions from Dr. Meldon Khan and a supplementary submission from the British Columbia Centre on Substance Use. Both submitters had been identified by the committee as stakeholders. The third submission is from the Canadian Association of People Who Use Drugs. These pieces of correspondence were provided to the committee members via the internal website of the committee. Are there any questions or comments in relation to these pieces of correspondence? All right, hearing none. At this time, I would like to open discussion as to whether a committee wishes to make these additional written submissions public on the committee website. We got to pass this.
To receive them officially,
Okay.
'cause they're past deadline.
Yeah. So we would need a motion to receive these submissions. If that's the will of the committee, I would ask for a potential motion now. Yep, draft, potentially what you might want to say is that the Select Special Committee to examine safe supply received the written submission from Dr. Meldon Khan, the May 2nd, 2022 submission of the British Columbia Centre on Substance Use, and the April 25th, 2022 submission from the Canadian Association of People Who Use Drugs. Is there any member that might want to move that? Excellent. MLA Milliken? Do you mind reading that for the record?
Member Milliken, I move that the Select Special Committee to examine safe supply receive the written submission from Dr. Meldon Kahan, the May 2nd, 2022 submission of the British Columbia Centre on Substance Use, and the April 25th, 2022 submission from the Canadian Association of People Who Use Drugs. I think just simply building off of what MLA Fry said there too, the goal here is to do this whole examination of safe supply in the most open and transparent way possible. So I think from my personal view, I don't have a problem with these being included publicly.
Excellent. Thank you, MLA Milliken. Is there any further discussion about that motion? Oh, MLA Allard.
Sure, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to concur again. I think, like I've said many times on this committee, we want to take a posture of curiosity, and I understand that these submissions were received slightly past the deadline, but in the spirit of open and transparent communication and a quest to understand the issue in a more fulsome manner, we want to accept these as presented.
Excellent. Thank you, MLA Fry. Or Allard. Is there any further discussion? All right, hearing and seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, online and in person, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, online and in person? Please say no. All right, that motion is carried. At this time, I would like to open the discussion as to whether the committee wishes to make these additional written submissions public on the committee website. So there could be a potential motion as follows, that the Select Special Committee to examine safe supply direct the committee clerk to make public the written submissions from Dr. Meldon Kahan, the submission of the British Columbian Centre on Substance Abuse dated May 2nd, 2022, and the submission from the Canadian Association of People Who Use Drugs dated April 25th, 2022, with the exception of personal contact information and confidential third-party information. Is there anybody that, excellent, MLA Milliken moves. Would you like to read that in for the record?
Sure, I would move, Member Milliken move that the Select Special Committee to examine safe supply direct the committee clerk to make public the written submission from Dr. Meldon Kahan, the submission of the British Columbia Centre on Substance Use dated May 2nd, 2022, and the submission from the Canadian Association of People Who Use Drugs dated April 25th, 2022, with the exception of personal contact information and confidential third-party information. And I would just reiterate what I said with regards to the previous motion, that I think getting as much out there and being as transparent as possible is essentially, I think, a goal that's shared by, I won't speak on behalf of everybody on the committee, but I think that it's fair to say that, from my understanding, it's a goal of everyone in this committee. So.
Perfect. Thank you, Emily Milliken. Any further discussion? All right, hearing and seeing none, I'll call the question. Anybody in favor of Emily Milliken's motion, online and in person, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, online and in person, please say no. All right, that is carried. All right, that moves us on to deliberations and recommendations. Honourable members, the time has arrived to begin discussing what we have heard as a committee in our examination of the matters referred to us in the Government Motion 115, passed on December 7th, 2021, and to propose recommendations that would serve as the foundation of our report to this Legislative Assembly. As a reminder to members, at its first meeting on January 18, 2022, the committee invited officials from the Ministry of Health to attend meetings of the committee and to participate when requested. Today, Mr. Evan Romano is here, should the committee ask him to participate in the proceedings. At this time, I would open the floor to any discussion and motions that members may wish to bring forward. Should we invite Romano?
No, it's up to you.
Invite Mr. Romano up now. We can do that now or later. Excellent. I'd like to invite Mr. Romano to the table.
Thank you. I'll just clarify, I'm not Evan Romano. I'm here on behalf of Evan Romano. He had a family emergency this morning, so.
Okay, well, we're happy to have you then. Can you please introduce yourself for the record?
Absolutely. My name's Kenton Puttock. I was part of the initial group on the first meeting you gave presentations. I'm Director of Addiction and Mental Health Legislation and Policy.
Perfect. Thank you for being here today. All right, so I'd like to now open up the discussion for members. Any motions that wish to be brought forward during deliberations? Oh, Emily Allard.
Thank you, Chair. I guess I'll just get us started. I have a draft motion to put before the committee that we can discuss. And my draft motion is that the Select Special Committee on Safe Supply recommend the government ensure maximum coverage, whether through supplementary health benefit plans or otherwise, of evidence-based medications, those being medications approved by the FDA and Health Canada for use in addictions treatment in the province for the treatment of addictions.
Excellent.
Did you get all that? Do you want me to say it again?
If you can.
Sure. I'll go a little slower. My draft motion, the Select Special Committee on Safe Supply recommend the government ensure maximum coverage, whether through supplementary health benefit plans or otherwise, of evidence-based medications, those being medications approved by the FDA and Health Canada for use in addictions treatment in the province for the treatment of addictions.
You got it?
If you pop it up on the screen, I can find where it's.
Draft motion.
It's a draft motion, yeah. Just want to make sure that the motion is what I want to say, and then we'll carry on.
Emily Allard.
Okay, that the Select Special Committee on Safe Supply recommend the government ensure, so we need to take out one ensure. Ensure maximum coverage of evidence-based, maximum coverage, comma, whether through supplementary health benefit plans, supplementary health. So just health and benefit need to be switched there. Supplementary health benefit plans or otherwise. Of evidence-based medications, those being medications approved by the FDA and Health Canada for use in addictions treatment in the province for the treatment of addictions. Sorry, that's a long one. We're going to put you to task today. Yeah, food and drug, yeah. the government ensure maximum coverage, whether through supplementary health benefit plans or otherwise, of evidence-based medications as we. Yeah, I think you've got it.
Excellent. Seeing the motion, is there any further discussion on that motion or draft motion? Mr. Coyne.
Yeah, I just want to ask one small clarifying question so I understand the intent of the motion. So this would require then medications used in Alberta to be approved by Health Canada, but as well the Food and Drug Administration in the United States. Is that what that reference to Food and Drug Administration is? So they would be required to also approve medications being used in Alberta?
So that's a good question. I think it. Because that's outside our jurisdiction. That's the only. I think the intent was because they've done more research. But I don't know that that's necessarily how we want it to be worded. Maybe you could say or Health Canada. Any thoughts, committee?
Any further thoughts on that? Emily Milliken?
I think one of the things that I would say here too is that we're doing recommendations. We're not actually strictly doing.
Right.
So where there is good evidence and research, I think that perhaps that could be valuable depending on regulations that get made in the future.
Excellent. Any further comments, Emily Allard?
But I would comment the word "and" means that the way it's worded, it looks like they both have to approve it.
So draft amendments, so you can, or motion?
Yeah, I might have to. I'm just trying to figure out a better way to say it through supplementary health benefit plans or otherwise votes. I think I would change it to or. Food and Drug Administration or Health Canada.
Can I offer
Mr.
one other suggestion? And it may not hit exactly what you want, but I'm wondering if the reference to Food and Drug Administration and Health Canada can just be removed, so you can say approved medications for use in addictions treatment, because even if you use the word or, what you're referring to is the Food and Drug Administration in the United States providing approval to use medication in Alberta. So, I mean, I'm unfortunately, I'm not the technical expert here in terms of use of medication, but I would imagine that if there is approval in the United States, Health Canada will look at that as part of the approval process in Canada, but the FDA wouldn't directly be approving medications for use here, unless that is the intent of sort of what the committee wants to do, then of course it could sort of ask for that.
Emily Fry?
I think part of the rationale for including the FDA and Health Canada expressly, and Member Allard can correct me on this, but was to bring into context the conversation around evidence-based medication. High-quality medical evidence is something that is often referred to by the Food and Drug Administration as well as Health Canada as a kind of a barometer of what good medical evidence is and what that means. It's a definitive term. So I think that those terms in this context are more of a contextualizing factor. Now, I'm not a lawyer, so I do understand that sometimes what we're saying is not exactly what it means when it's written out, so I welcome that as well. But based on the presentations that we've heard from stakeholders, it's what I have found as a member of this committee is that Safe Supply is far from evidence-based medication. So without using this kind of contextualizing language, I think that we can go off based on where the definitions come from. And I believe that that is the intent of this motion, if I'm correct, and Member Allard can correct me or not.
Emily Allard?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, that is correct, and that is the intent. However, as I look at it again, I do think it is a bit problematic to have those specific, and this is only a recommendation, right? So the committee is making a recommendation. And I think the words evidence-based medications in there, but you're right, that is the intent. We did hear a lot of presentations at the committee about how Safe Supply is not necessarily an evidence-based practice, and the medications used aren't either necessarily. So if we changed it and took out the Food and Drug Administration and Health Canada, given that it's only a recommendation, it would say still of evidence-based medications, those being medications for use in addictions treatment in the okay, that doesn't make sense anymore.
If the intent is, thank you, Member Fry through the chair, if the intent is actually that those medications that are being covered through supplementary health benefits must be approved by both the FDA and Health Canada as evidence that those medications are truly evidence-based, if that's sort of the intention, then by all means that can be the recommendation. So if the committee is saying we want those medications to be used only if they've been approved by both jurisdictions, that's certainly, I mean, if that's the intent, then that's fine.
Emily Allard.
Yeah, okay, I'm just going to try this one more time. That the Select Special Committee on Safe Supply recommend the government ensure maximum coverage, whether through supplementary health benefit plans or otherwise, of evidence-based medications. Then we're going to scrap all of the next line. So we'll just say of evidence-based medications in the province for the treatment of addictions. And then I think that recommendation is solid enough based on the evidence that we've heard here at the committee. Again, it's a recommendation, and that will go to the ministry and for their further exploration. If they so choose to put those other parameters in, they can. We've had this on the record discussion at committee. So I think that is a suitable alternative.
Perfect. Emily Fry.
And I would just add that the rationale for needing this motion as well, we know that there are some evidence-based medications that are working. Alberta was one of the leaders in introducing Sublocade as an option for people on opioid agonist therapy. So we do have many harm reduction measures, quote unquote, that need to be talked about, and they still need to be used. And I think it's important that we are noting in this motion as well, which we are through saying evidence-based medication, that there are evidence-based medications that do what they are intending to do. Like, for example, Suboxone, methadone. We still need these opioid agonist therapies in our communities, and that's what we mean by evidence-based medication.
Thank you. Any further comments? All right, hearing none. Emily Allard, if you are comfortable with this, we'll need you to formally move this as a motion.
Sure, thank you, Chair. So I am happy to move that the Select Special Committee on Safe Supply recommend the government ensure maximum coverage, whether through supplementary health benefit plans or otherwise, of evidence-based medications for use by the province for the treatment of addictions.
Thank you, Emily Allard. All right, hearing the motion, is there any further discussion? Emily Allard.
I already have one tweak. I wonder if it should say for use in the province. Yeah.
Excellent. We'll need a sub-amendment at this point, or amendments maybe?
No, I think this was just clarification of what's on the screen.
The clarification is accepted. That solves that? Okay. Kind of. Perfect. Excellent. Seeing the motion now as presented, is there any further comments or questions from the committee? All right. Hearing and seeing none, I will call the question. All in favor of the motion presented by Emily Allard, online and in person, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Please say no. That is carried. Is there any further discussion? Emily Amory.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to committee members for your contributions thus far this morning. It's been a very fulsome discussion about a number of things, but I too would like to bring forward another suggestion for this committee in the form of a draft motion, if that's okay. May I bring that forward now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I would like to bring a draft motion, which is to move that the Select Special Committee on Safe Supply recommend that the government allow for supply replacement in the context of a treatment plan under strict in-clinic medical supervision. The rationale for this is that this committee was struck to examine the concept of safe supply, which was defined under Section 2A of the committee mandate to include the provision of pharmaceutical opioids. In a similar vein to the first motion, however, we saw that having some form of safe supply or non-tainted substances can be helpful in treatment and helping individuals in recovery. But something that we did hear over and over again through the presentations that came forward to this committee was the concern around diversion, being the issue of medication being diverted away from the subject patient or the individual who is receiving it, and the impact that it would have on communities and individuals outside of that intended person who was supposed to receive those medications. So in the context of safe supply and treatment, I think it's important that folks on their way to recovery do have access to the appropriate treatments that they need. And it is equally important that this committee consider and contemplate motions that ensure that the treatments are actually received and used by the individuals that they were intended for. And that's why I would suggest, or I would submit to this committee, that this motion would recommend that the government allow access to supply replacement in the context of treatment, but also make sure that it make adequate provisions to ensure that this government mitigates any potential for spread to community or unintended individuals or purposes. We heard Dr. Mogus, who even advocated for the supervised consumption of these substances in their presentation. And so with regard to the examination of safe supply, we certainly did see a value in the availability of it in the context of a treatment plan, so long as there is no possibility of community spread.
Excellent. Thank you, Emily Amory. Any further discussion on Emily Amory's draft motion? Can I make the one recommendation about potentially removing the word being after replacement? Does that dramatically change? You're fine with that change? Okay. All right, any further discussion? All right, hearing and seeing none, would you like to make your draft motion an official motion by reading it into the record?
Certainly, Mr. Chair, and thank you. I move that the Select Special Committee on Safe Supply recommend that the government allow for supply replacement in the context of a treatment plan under strict in-clinic medical supervision.
Excellent. Hearing the motion as presented by Emily Amory, is there any further discussion? All right, hearing and seeing none, I'll ask the question. All in favor, online and in person, please say aye. Any opposed, online and in person, please say no. That is carried. All right, next up we have Emily Yao.
Thank you so much, Chair. I feel that the government, we need to provide direction to groups like the College of Physicians and Surgeons and others that in the context that in previous eras, a lot of these opioids were branded as safe, and as a result, prescription rates rose dramatically, and we learned afterwards that physicians might not have had the appropriate education related to this. So I've just crafted a draft motion here, and I might need your help with it, but my draft motion is that the Select Special Committee on Safe Supply recommend that the government take the necessary steps to implement a provincial strategy to the management of pain. And I don't know if Mr. Roth or anyone else can provide us with direction, but like, how do we influence the College of Physicians as an example to ensure that they have proper education provided to their physicians in this regards?
All right, here the draft proposal by Emily Yao. Is there any discussion? Emily Yao asked a question. Are you able to respond?
Sure. I think it's a broad question, Mr. Chair, and it would really be up to the committee what they wish to do. But for example, if I was just sort of guessing at some potential ways forward, if you were going to add 2 clauses to this and add an additional clause, you could recommend that the government work with the college to achieve certain objectives, or if that wasn't strong enough, you could certainly ask for the government to bring forward legislation to amend the applicable legislation to incorporate some additional elements if that's what the committee wished. So it's entirely up to the committee how it wants to see that work with the college. But you could certainly divide this into 2 clauses. So recommend that A, the government take the necessary steps to implement a provincial strategy for the management of pain, and B, work with the College of Physicians and Surgeons to achieve an objective.
Leo?
Mr. Koenig, the way I crafted my motion, do you think that captures that, or that would be inherent within there, that the government take the necessary steps to implement a provincial strategy? Would inherent have the college for?
Whenever you're asking a lot of those questions, I think we'll always say be explicit, don't imply anything. I believe, and my colleague Ms. Robert can confirm, but I believe there is a bit of context provided in the report before the motion. So if that's the will of the committee, I think some of that information about this discussion could be put in that report. However, if it's sort of a substantive piece of what this recommendation is, it's probably better to add it into the motion if that's what the committee wishes to do.
Ms. Robert? Oh, Emily Allard. Oh, sorry, Yao. Emily Yao. No, Emily Stefan.
Hi. Sure.
Sorry, guys.
I just want to speak in favor of the draft motion that my colleague has raised here. I know under committee mandate 2D, the committee was tasked to examine the historical evidence regarding the overprescribing of opioids. And as we heard from presenters, in examining the evidence regarding the overprescribing of opioids, we did see concrete evidence that once opioids were branded as safe to prescribe for pain medication, the prescription rate increased dramatically without really understanding some of the collateral potential consequences of this practice. And as we reviewed the historic overprescription of opioids, we saw a direct link to the rise of the opioid crisis, which safe supply as a concept attempts to address. So I'd like to raise those points in support of my colleague's motion that he just made.
Thank you, Emily Stefan. Emily Yao.
Could I add a supplemental to my draft motion that says that the Safe Supply Committee recommend that the government take the necessary steps to implement a provincial strategy to the management of pain, including but not limited to engaging with the College of Physicians and Surgeons? Would that capture what I'm trying to achieve?
That's right. We're just going to make that change. See what this change.
Engaging with the
Excellent. Emily Yao, does that reflect what you were thinking?
Yeah, I think that's better. I felt we really need to include the college in this regards, as they are responsible for education for physicians who provide these prescriptions. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right, seeing the motion now, is there any further, draft motion now, is there any further discussion? All right, hearing and seeing none. MLA Yao, would you like to make your draft motion official by reading it into the record?
Thank you. I'd like to read that the Select Special Committee on Safe Supply recommend that the government take the necessary steps to implement a provincial strategy for the management of pain, including engaging with the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Alberta.
Excellent. Hearing the motion, is there any further discussion? MLA Allard?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just also wanted to support this motion, and I wanted to harken back to some of the presentations we heard. Dr. Lemke spoke about pain doctors in the early 2000s prescribing opioids for minor and chronic pain conditions, because the understanding then was that they were safe to use for those purposes, and Dr. Madras explaining how increased access and normalization for any pain indication eventually led to increased misuse, addiction, overdose, and deaths. And so I think this is, again, a recommendation to the ministry, but I think it's an important recommendation around what are the parameters for a provincial strategy for the management of pain that are not going to be harmful. So I just wanted to speak in support of the motion and thank the mover.
Thank you, MLA Allard. Any further comments or discussion? All right, hearing and seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor in the room, please say, or in her room or online, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed in the room or online, please say no. That is carried. MLA Stefan?
Yes. Can you hear me okay, Chair?
You can, yes.
Great. I'd like to make a motion as well, a draft motion initially, which is that the Select Special Committee on Safe Supply recommend that any government policies with regards to addiction treatment and medication should consider the interplay between diversion and the illicit market. And I just want to comment on this draft motion. This committee was tasked with looking at how safe supply would impact community diversion of drugs under paragraph 2B of the committee mandate. And we did hear from a number of presenters about the issue of diversion when it comes to safe supply. And given that the definition of safe supply is broad in that it does include the provision of pharmaceutical opioids to people who are addicted or dependent on these substances, which includes in the context of treatment plans, it's really important that government keep in mind how diversion can be impacted by government policy. We know that when someone is prescribed as part of treatment, that in some cases there is a sale of those prescriptions in the illicit market. We know that individuals, we heard from some presenters that our neighbors who are sometimes suffering under addictions are really, there's that desire often to pursue a high, always seeking the high as much as possible. And sometimes, unfortunately, prescribed pharmaceuticals are used as currency in seeking stronger illicit drugs for getting that high. So it's really important that we do address that issue of diversion. And I'd welcome other comments from my colleagues.
Thank you, member. Any further comments on this? Emily Allard.
Yeah, I just wanted again to speak in favor of this draft motion and to reiterate what MLA Stefan was talking about. We heard from Dr. Best, as he mentioned, and just in general, when you have more drug supply available, it's almost inevitable that it'll lead to more drug users, which is why the government has to be vigilant and diligent in how it evaluates policy options to ensure the minimization of harm to communities and society. And I think we heard that over and over in the, particularly in the oral presentations from jurisdictions, that, this is an emerging base of knowledge, but the trends that we're seeing are troubling. And so I would support this motion that there must be consideration of the interplay between diversion and the illicit market, because it's definitely been linked and clearly supported in the evidence that has been presented before the committee. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Excellent. Thank you, Emily Allard. Any further comments? The one comment I'd like to make for consideration is the word diversion, and maybe the need to define that a little bit more so that we can give them clear direction and connect it to scope. Emily Fry.
In the spirit of camaraderie, I'm wondering if I can help you with that, Mr. Chair. And I'm wondering if, after consider the interplay between diversion, could we say diversion of drugs used in the process of safe supply, or something like that, so that we're defining diversion, because the issue is that these drugs that are often used and prescribed by physicians in the pursuit of so-called safe supply are the ones that are being diverted and being given and being sold and commodified on the street. So, and given street value, and that's, I believe, at the heart of this motion, which MLA Stefan very articulately explained, much more so than I. But I would just wonder if after diversion we could add something about where they're coming from. So if I may, that the Select Special Committee to Examine Safe Supply recommend that any government policies with regards to addiction treatment and medication should consider the interplay between diversion of therapies used for safe supply and to the illicit market.
We'll try and get that drafted for you.
If MLA Stefan is amenable to that amendment.
Could you not just say diversion of drugs from safe supply?
Diversion of drugs
Oh, yeah, that's fine.
away from the intended user and to the illicit market. I think grammatically that's probably an issue.
Okay, we'll try and make that change and see.
I take an and just say two.
Yeah. Start with any government policies with regards to addiction treatment and medication should
Yeah.
Does MLA Stefan accept those changes?
Emily Stefan.
I have to admit, the interface that I'm seeing, I only see part of the motion because of the screen. If this is agreeable to my colleagues in terms of the amendments of the motion to make it better, I'm fine with it. But I can't. Oh, okay. Aaron sent me the text here. I have this legislative office. Your computer is about to restart. Window that won't disappear, Aaron. I can't actually read the entire motion. I'm trying to close that box. But colleagues, if you're agreeable with Michaela's refinements, or as a group, I'm agreeable to it as well to make it better. I think we all agree that we want to address diversion properly, as that was one of our mandates.
Excellent. Any further discussion on that then? All right, this was MLA Stephan's draft motion, but since he can't read it, maybe another member would like to move this motion. MLA Fry?
I will move this. MLA Fry moves that the Select Special Committee to Examine Safe Supply recommend that any government policies with regards to addiction, treatment, and medication should consider the interplay between diversion of drugs used in the provision of safe supply away from the intended user to the illicit market.
Excellent. Hearing the motion as presented, is there any further discussion? All right, hearing and seeing none, I will call the question. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say no. That is carried. MLA Fry.
Me again, Mr. Chair. And on the topic of diversion, I know that sometimes the Hansard is used to inform when somebody is interpreting what we have passed it in a motion. So I'd just like to, for the record, say that diversion in this case refers to the transfer of medication from what is a lawful channel to an unlawful channel of distribution or use, including by medication tampering. So whether that text is in the motion or not, I think that because of the long-standing practice of using, I know Parliamentary Council, including department lawyers, will often use the text of Hansard to interpret intent when and to just decipher what intent is when coming from legislation. I can be corrected on that, but that is what I've been led to believe. So for the record, I'll put that there. And I do actually have a draft motion ready because this committee was tasked with looking how safe supply would impact community diversion of drugs under 2B of the committee mandate. So, and as already stated by Mr. Stephan, we did hear time and time again with the issue of diversion when it comes to safe supply, specifically the propensity for these drugs to go from a place of a physician's office to the market, getting street value and also being used and commodified and traded. So given that the definition of safe supply is broad, and we've already acknowledged this, it includes the provision of pharmaceutical opioids to people who are addicted or dependent on these substances. I think that it's really important that we ensure that there is a check on the prescription of agonist opioids and how they are prescribed makes sense in the context of the committee's work. So I do have a draft motion here, Mr. Chair. Mr. Clerk, would you like me to read it into the record? Okay. So MLA Fry moves that the Select Special Committee on Safe Supply recommend that the government take necessary steps to protect the public from the provision of harmful pharmaceutical practices, such as the widespread prescription of full agonist opioids that can lead to community diversion and increase addiction and overdose. Would you like me to say that again, but slower? I recognize it though. Oh, look at that. The coffee is working at this committee today.
It's linking it to the safe supply and then defining that diversion piece.
All right, members, we're just going to take a quick 2-minute, or we'll go 5-minute recess for everybody to fill up their coffee cups and return back here at 10:13. All right, members, thank you for entertaining a brief recess. We are back to the draft motion. MLA Fry.
Yes, Mr. Chair, welcome back. I recognize that this motion, upon reading it again, may not satisfy the needs of being directly connected to the committee's mandate, so I want to make a change to my motion because I understand it's still a draft motion right now. Okay, so after opioids, comma, I would like to add such as widespread prescription of phylogenious opioids, comma, often used in the practice of safe supply, comma, that can lead to community diversion and increased addiction and overdose. I believe that that then links it back to the mandate and it would be sufficient, but I'd be open to further amendment.
So thank you, Emily Fry. We're just going to get those changes on the board. Yeah, there's a 2 in there. Excellent. Any further discussion? All right, hearing and seeing none, do we want to make that a formal motion?
Yes. Sorry.
Emily Michaela or Fry.
MLA Fry moved that the Special Select Committee to examine safe supply recommend that the government take the necessary steps to protect the public from the provision of harmful pharmaceutical practices such as widespread prescription of full agonist opioids, often used in the practice of safe supply, that can lead to community diversion and increased addiction and overdose. I so move that, Mr. Chair.
Excellent, thank you, Emily Fry. Any further discussion now that we've heard the formal motion? All right, hearing and seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Online? Please say aye. All right, any opposed? Oh, there we go. Any opposed online in person, please say no. All right, that is carried. Any further discussion? MLA Milliken.
I also have a draft potential motion, which I could read out. I would move that the Select Special Committee on Safe Supply recommend that the government explore enhancing police ability to use alternatives to the criminal justice system to support an individual's path to recovery. I think it's, I'll wait until it goes up.
Emily, would you like to explain?
I believe that encompasses it. I think it's fair to say that the committee has been tasked with a few things, including the impact that perhaps on the community through potential diversion of drugs. That's under 2C. There's also, I believe, 2B, which talks about community impacts as well. And based on the evidence that I think that we've heard, we did see that impacts can exist, including with crime and general police intervention issues. So we heard as a committee that when safe supply sites are implemented, sometimes it can be the case that local businesses can be pretty highly impacted. Including everything from stepping over paraphernalia, other barriers, things of that nature, perhaps even vandalism and other potential activities. So to me, I think it seems fair that there is a good chance that those suffering from addiction who commit a crime may not be processed or may just simply be processed and put through a system without having their root cause of their addiction addressed. And I think that it's very important that these people deserve a chance at recovery and, of course, our compassion. With that, it kind of leads me into I was very interested and I listened with great interest to Dr. João Goulão, who is essentially, I guess you could call him the mastermind of the Portuguese model, where they've decriminalized, but of course drugs that are still illegal. What ends up happening is individuals who are picked up by the police for those activities, ultimately, I think, as far as I understand it, get faced with a decision where they can either go into the criminal justice system or they can accept basically an on-demand treatment opportunity, which is, I think, what our province in the last couple of years with the addition of 8,000 new treatment beds, that's something that I think, not speaking on behalf of the ministry, but I think that would be a goal or a great goal. And that's through their Drug Dissuasion Commission, which also, I know that when we start talking about issues with regards to policing and things of that nature, we can get into different jurisdictions of government and things of that nature. Interesting part of the Drug Dissuasion Commission in Portugal that I found was the fact that it actually wasn't even under the Ministry of Justice. It was actually under the Ministry of Health, and provision of healthcare. There can be issues with regards to whether it's, obviously that falls within the province. So I think that there could be some good opportunities here. And then finally, with regards to the mandate too, I noticed that on E, whether there is evidence that a proposed safe supply would be accompanied by any other benefits or consequences. I think at least what we saw from stakeholders was that there was at least some evidence where as you increase supply, there can often be a correlation with an increase in individuals with OUD. And then that can then lead to an increase, of course, with regards to community issues, and that could be pressure on the justice system, et cetera. So I would encourage all members to vote in favor of this draft motion if we decide to make it into a formal motion.
Excellent. Any other members? Emily, sorry, Mr. Coney.
Just one small comment before an official motion is moved. Just pointing out that the criminal justice system is federal jurisdiction, so this doesn't directly sort of call upon changes there, but I'm wondering if it might be worthwhile just to ensure when the committee is considering what alternatives might be that we're clearly within provincial powers. So I'm wondering if maybe the committee could consider a slight rephrasing, so recommend that the government explore options for enhancing police ability to use alternatives to the criminal justice system, which leaves open the door if those options do touch upon federal jurisdiction, that you're not asking for direct action, you're just asking to look at those options, and that may include working with other levels of government to achieve those objectives.
Emily Milken?
Absolutely. And I tried to kind of address that when I was talking about the division of powers and stuff like that. I think that it's pretty fair to say that successes that I think have been seen, whether you even take the Portuguese model, the model from Portugal, is that there's a huge coordination of services, and the police aspect is just one aspect of it. So whatever we can do to explore this motion in order to lead to a better opportunity for an individual's path to recovery from OUD, I am in favor of.
Any other discussion?
The draft proposal amendments that Mr. Koenig suggested up on the board so that we can take another look at it.
Further-
No, I'm happy with that. When Emily Milliken was talking a little bit about the police ability, I immediately turned my mind to the administrative options that police in Alberta might have, and that might sort of narrow in the jurisdictional question of whether or not police in Alberta have the ability to do this. I think that the wording that has been suggested to use alternatives is even broader and allows for greater scope for police to apply their abilities within the criminal justice system and administratively to support an individual's path to recovery, and I'm quite happy with that. So if there's no other comments, I'm good.
Emily Milliken.
And just to sort of buttress what my colleague said too, I had some experiences having been active with Bridges Line Duty Council for many years, and so I had a lot of interaction with police officers across Western Canada, and the revolving door aspect that many can attest to. I think if we can figure out a way to find an off-ramp, then it can. A lot of the time, sometimes from what I've talked to police officers who just feel like the people come in and they send them back out and they come back in, and that can be really that can work towards having officers get kind of jaded and stuff like that. And I think anything that we can do to support the police in ensuring that they truly see that they are doing really good work in the community, I think would be good. And I think that this would accomplish that, or could.
Excellent. Any other comments? Emily Stefan.
Thank you, Chair. I really appreciate this motion. I know in Red Deer, the government has enhanced alternatives to the criminal justice system by way of a drug court route and option. And I think those types of initiatives are ones that are worthy in both supporting the individual who finds himself perhaps otherwise subject to the traditional criminal law system, but as well the community as a whole and their families. So this is something that I think aligns well with alternatives such as drug court.
Thank you, Emily Stefan. I do have one comment. You had referenced sections of the mandate in your rationale. I'm just wondering if there's a way that we can try and tie this with the mandate actually in the written section up here. And maybe one suggestion would be to start off with the acknowledge, so that the Select Special Committee of Safe Supply acknowledge the harm, recognizing the inadequacy of safe supply at the start. And that might help pull it in more in scope within the mandate.
I'm not sure if that encompasses what I was thinking.
Okay.
The inadequacy, I don't understand why we'd be making a judgment call with regards to that within this motion. I think that perhaps adding something towards the end that might say something along the lines of individuals' path to recovery and in support of the community at large. The evidence that we saw obviously was that when supply increases, there can be increased correlation to individuals with OUD, which then also leads to increases in localized crime. That's one of the very reasons why Dr. Zhao Gulao in his initial 1999 plan, ultimately the goal of that plan was to reduce supply. So would that be acceptable as something that would be able to be ruled in order by the chair?
Yeah, so if I understand correctly, in regards to stemming the flow of additional opioids on the street.
And in support of the community at large. Community having been referenced several times in our mandate. could, for the record.
Yep, Emily.
I think that one of the things that I'm a little bit worried about with regards to the way that this committee is pushing for being very, very prescriptive within the mandate. I think the last point of the mandate, E, was really intended as a bit of a catch-all for consequences. So I think it's really important that when we're considering some of the issues that can be pretty easily tied to potential safer supply situations that we've seen through the evidence from the stakeholders that as they've presented, I think it's really important to remember that and just be compassionate of it's not just an individual. Yes, our goals here are obviously to save lives and get people treated, but it's also to ensure that society as a whole is not put at risk.
Thank you, member. Any further comments? Emily Allard.
Yes, thank you. I think we've discussed this at great length, and I appreciate the motion being brought forward by the member. I just wanted to highlight for the record that I think the intent behind motions like this is to ensure that we are looking at this from a healthcare lens, not just a policing response. And so we heard a lot about the illness of addiction, and we want to ensure that we have a compassionate response and that we provide recommendation to the Minister of Health around a healthcare response, not just a response that may be punitive in nature. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Excellent. Thank you, Emily Allard. Any further discussion? All right, hearing none. Emily Milliken, would you like to read that into the record?
I move that the Select Special Committee to examine safe supply recommend that the government explore options for enhancing police ability to use alternatives to the criminal justice system to support an individual's path to recovery from addiction and in support of the community at large.
Excellent. Hearing the motion formally as presented. Is there any further discussion? All right, hearing nothing else, I'll call the question. All in favor, please say aye, online and in person. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. All right, that is carried. Any further discussion? Emily Amory.
Thank you very much. I'd like to present again a draft motion for the consideration of this committee. I'll read the draft motion into the record and then I'll give my rationale for why I think it is important. My draft motion is as follows: that the Select Special Committee on Safe Supply recommend that the government take the necessary steps to insulate the medical education from the influences of the pharmaceutical industry. The reason for this draft motion is as follows. Under Committee Mandate 2D, this committee was tasked with examining historical evidence with respect to the overprescribing of opioids. In examining the historical evidence regarding the overprescribing of opioids, we did see how the pharmaceutical industry impacted prescription rates. Now, we heard from the presentations and we heard explicitly from Dr. Tanguay that in the 1990s and 2000s, a lot of the education that took place by the pharmaceutical industry was geared towards physicians. This is a practice that continues to happen today. And Dr. Tanguay also stated that the pharmaceutical companies knew and know that the more that they were able to present before physicians, the more likely that a physician was likely to prescribe the medication that they were providing details and information on. Mr. Chair, in the review from SFU, we also saw that the recent Stanford Lancet Commission emphasized the role of commercial and particularly pharmaceutical interests in a multi-system regulatory failure as contributors to the current drug poisoning crisis. The Commission detailed an urgent need to prevent profit-driven clinicians and industries from influencing addiction policies and practices. Among their recommendations to reduce the influence of profit, the Commission recommends, quote, bodies of legal or regulatory power to shape over-prescribing should not accept industry funding or include people with direct financial ties to the pharmaceutical industry, end quote. Mr. Chair, I think that broadly speaking, given the root of the crisis, which leads us to talk about safe supply today, it makes sense to recommend that the government take steps to maintain the integrity of medical education for our physicians and to prevent the continuation of this ongoing crisis and the creation of a future one. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, MLA Amory. Any further discussion on this potential draft motion? MLA Amory, is that motion correct?
Yes, I'm happy with that motion.
Excellent. All right. Any further conversation? Hearing and seeing none, would you like to formally read that into the record?
I move that the Select Special Committee on Safe Supply acknowledge the damaging effect of the overprescription of opioids and recommend that the government take the necessary steps to insulate medical education from the influences of the pharmaceutical industry.
Excellent. Hearing the formal motion, is there any further conversation? All right, hearing and seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor in the room and online, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Please say no. That is carried. All right, any further discussion? Emily Allard.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think we're making great progress, and I just wanted to acknowledge our guest again. I apologize we haven't included you much, but I appreciate you being here. And I too have a draft motion, but before I provide that, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the rationale for it. Actually, maybe I'll provide it first. That might be easier. So I'd like to put into draft motion that the Select Special Committee on Safe Supply recommend that the government commit to working in collaboration with the College of Physicians and Surgeons to ensure that physicians are educated on criteria for suitable opioid prescription. I think this goes hand in hand with some of the other motions that we've already heard this morning. Certainly the motion from MLA Amory that we just voted on, and previously the motion from MLA Yao. So I'll talk a little, do you need me to read that again? Perfect. So I'll talk a little bit about it. Under Committee Mandate 2D, the committee was tasked to examine historical evidence regarding the overprescribing of opioids. In examining the historical evidence regarding this practice of overprescribing of opioids, we heard how important education is in proper drug prescription. And I wanted to reference back to when Dr. Hinshaw was here and speaking to the committee. She spoke to her experience when she went to medical school and how the training at the time was very focused on the importance of providing adequate pain relief and pain management, which obviously continues to be important today. However, at the time there were fewer checks and balances than there are today in relation to the prescription of opioids, and I think that's understandable given that it was an emerging class of drugs and there wasn't as much known about the longitudinal impacts of prescribing opioids. I don't think there was any malicious intent. It was just not understood, and as we have a growing base of evidence, we can see the challenges before the medical community as they try to balance the management of pain with the risk to the patient of a long-term addiction problem. Dr. Hinshaw also added that more recently the College of Physicians and Surgeons has done a lot of work, I think to their credit, to make sure people can access pain control and the medications they need through an informed view of the patient, both of the risk factors and the contextual information of the patient. Deaths that involve prescription opioids have dropped dramatically. I think that's notable, in part due to the work done to make sure that prescribers are using a whole person assessment. So in understanding this, I think it's clear that it's important that the work continues in the medical field with regards to safe opioid prescription. And I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank the College of Physicians and Surgeons for the work they've done to date in addressing this concern. I hope that we are moving in the right direction collectively, and so that's the spirit behind this motion. So with that said, I think I'm going to just look at the motion. I think it's good the way I see it on the screen, so I'm going to read it into the record as a proposed motion. I move that the Select Special Committee to examine safe supply recommend that the government commit to working in collaboration with the College of Physicians and Surgeons to ensure that physicians are educated on criteria for suitable opioid prescription.
Excellent. Thank you, MLA at large. Any further discussion on the motion before us? Okay, hearing and seeing none. That was a formal read-in, I believe.
That was a
Yep.
formal read-in, yeah.
Perfect. I will call the question. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Please say no. That is carried. Any further discussion? MLA Fry.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'm wondering if we could have a quick 5-minute recess to, before we discuss next steps.
For sure. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
I move, or we're going to have a recess until 10:49. Thank you, members. As members know, the method by which the committee reports its deliberations and recommendations to the Assembly is by way of written report. The common practice is to request that the Legislative Assembly Office Research Services prepare a draft report of the committee's recommendations and other information the committee wishes to convey in relation to matters heard during its review of the matters referred to in Government Motion 115. At this time, I would like to open the floor to discussion or motion. Ms. Robert is also here if members have any questions about this process. Are there any questions about this process? Perfect. So maybe we have a draft motion from a member that might read as that the Select Special Committee to examine Safe Supply direct research services to prepare a draft report of the committee's review of the matters referred to it by the Legislative Assembly as mandated in Government Motion 115 agreed to on December 7th, 2021, including any recommendations made by the committee, and that the chair be authorized to approve the draft report after it's been distributed to the committee members for their review. Emily Allard, can you read that in for the record?
Sure. I'm happy to move that the Select Special Committee to examine Safe Supply direct research services to prepare a draft report of the committee's review of the matters referred to it by the Legislative Assembly as mandated in Government Motion 115, agreed to on December 7th, 2021, including any recommendations made by the committee, and that the chair be authorized to approve the draft report after it has been distributed to committee members for their review.
Excellent. Any further discussion on this? All right, hearing and seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor online and in the room, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Please say no. That motion is carried. Honourable members, this may well be our final meeting of this committee. The practice in similar select special committees has been to authorize the chair to approve the minutes of this meeting after members have had the opportunity to review them for the records of the Assembly. I would like to open the floor for discussion on this matter and potentially entertain a motion that states that the Select Special Committee to examine Safe Supply authorize the chair to approve the draft minutes of June the 7th, 2022 meeting of the committee after they have been circulated to the committee members for review. Is there any discussion about that, or anybody would like to move that motion? MLA Milliken.
I just have a quick question. It's actually for maybe the clerk or even yourself, Chair. When you are approving or not approving, when you're making that decision with regards to the draft final report, is it at that time where you would be able to potentially ask that certain aspects of stakeholder whatever they've presented to us get sort of included if you consider them important as like an appendix? Is that something that is within your ability?
Yeah, so correct me if I'm wrong, but this would be distributed to committee members for your review. So at that time, if I heard significant feedback from members, then we would be able to submit that for revisions at that point before it was approved by myself. Ms. Robert?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So what specifically?
Just let's hypothetically say members wanted to include the SFU report, but it wasn't included. Would the members be able to add it as an appendix in their review?
I think if that's the wish of the
okay,
if that's the wish of the committee should perhaps make that decision on the record that they want something like that included in the report.
Okay. So we already passed the motion that would allow for myself. So would we need to pass an additional motion at this point then?
Yes, I would say so.
So do you want to propose a motion to that effect?
Sure. If that's this. Do we have to go back an agenda item?
Yeah, we did move on to agenda item C, so.
Yeah. Sorry, Mr. Chair, if I may. And the other thing you might want to consider, is there anything else you want to add into the report? And then you could perhaps do it all in one fell swoop, as it were. And yes, I think you probably, we've gone past the section of the meeting that's dealing with the report of the committee, and so I think the committee would have to agree to go back to that item.
Excellent. Hearing that, does the committee agree to move back to section B, report of the committee to the Assembly?
Agreed.
All in favor? Aye. Perfect. All right, we are now in section B. Emily Milliken.
I would just like to add, I guess, to the previous motion that we include the SFU report as an appendix to the report.
We can pass a second, yeah.
Excellent. We'll get that written up.
Whatever's easiest.
Excellent. Emily Milliken, is there anything else you'd like to add to that? Or is that reflective of what your thoughts are?
And there's a couple like there's the double two, and I think it's direct research services as to add as an appendix. And then there's the committee 2-2. But other than that, the goal's there.
222 always gets confusing.
That's only one. If it's only one, we should collapse that into.
While we do that, Emily, Stefan, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I just have a question about process. And that is, given that we did have some issues with the summary this morning in terms of the representation of the presentations we heard, both written and oral, I was wondering if there's going to be an opportunity for the committee to have a review of the report itself and make any necessary or suggest any edits prior to the release to the Legislative Assembly. Would a meeting be necessary for that, or are we able to do that working through the chair?
So thank you, Emily. Stefan, we just passed a motion that would allow for the chair to authorize and approve the draft report after it's been sent to committee members. So theoretically, committee members would have the opportunity to provide feedback at that time and make appropriate changes.
Thank you.
Emily Allard?
For clarity, I think that the research review would be attached to the minutes, and that's the same process, right? We're authorizing you, or we're about to authorize you to approve the final minutes, and so that would be the same process there, correct,
Yep.
Chair? Yeah.
That would be the same process. All right. Emily Milliken. Or is there any further discussion, questions? Emily Milliken, would you like to read that in if that's reflective of your
Sure,
thoughts?
yeah, that I move that the Select Special Committee to examine Safe Supply direct research services to add as an appendix to the draft report of the committee to the Assembly, the report from SFU entitled Public Supply of Addictive Drugs, a rapid review.
Excellent. Hearing the motion as proposed by Emily Milliken, is there any further conversation? Emily Steffen, is your hand still up?
No, it's not. I'll put it down.
Perfect.
My apologies.
Nope, that's okay. All right, hearing and seeing none then, I will call the question. All in favor of Emily Milliken's motion, please say aye, online and in person.
Aye.
Any opposed, online or in person, please say no. That is carried. All right, before we move to subsection C, is there any further business under subsection B? Perfect, all right, we will head to C, approval of final minutes. Honourable members, as this may be the final meeting of the committee, the practice in similar select special committees has been to authorize the chair to approve the minutes of this meeting after members have had the opportunity to review them for the record of the Assembly. I'd like to open the floor for discussion of this matter and a potential motion that states that the Select Special Committee to examine safe supply authorize the chair to approve the draft minutes of the June 7th, 2022 meeting of the committee after they have been circulated to the committee members for review. Any discussion or potential motion? Excellent. Emily Allard, would you like to read that in for the record?
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that this Select Special Committee to examine safe supply authorize the chair to approve the draft minutes of the June 7th, 2022 meeting of the committee after they have been circulated to all committee members for review.
Excellent. Any further discussion on that? Emily Yao.
No, my apologies. I want to talk about the issues. My apologies here. About the summary of issues and proposals. I don't know if we can go back to that, but that's why I have my hand raised.
Okay, sorry. So we'll deal with this motion that's before us at this point then, and then come back to you, Emily Yao? Okay. Any discussion on the motion? All right, hearing and seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, online and in person, please say aye. Any opposed, please say no, online and in person. That is carried. All right, Emily, I'm just going to suggest we head into other business and maybe address your concerns at that point. So we're now in other business. Emily Yao.
Thank you. I'd like to go back to the summary of issues and proposals and just my concerns with it. I guess in the end, obviously at first glance, it just seems unbalanced compared to the amount of submissions that we had. But as I read it further, I guess my concern is in regarding to opposition to the provision of safe supply. A lot of other solutions were provided by a lot of these alternative treatments were provided by a lot of the subject matter experts, and those aren't really expanded on here in section 1B of stakeholder suggestions for medical support, especially treatment services and social services. Whereas under the support for the provision of safe supply, she provides in great detail what they should be doing. So to that effect, I'm wondering if we could ask for the good doctor to expand on 1B, opposition to the provision of safe supply, and the stakeholder suggestions for medical support, to expand on a lot of the things that were provided to us. And I think that would ensure that this document appears to be more balanced in my perspective. I'm just wondering about other people's.
Dr. Maslin.
Yeah, just for the committee to note, this document was prepared with the government motion in mind, Government Motion 115. And I know the committee's familiar with this motion, but if you read part two of that motion, you'll see that it's really about safe supply. And to examine the concept, to examine the efficacy of safe supply. So this document was prepared with that in mind. So it dealt with the issue of safe supply. It did not deal with alternative medical processes, procedures, and alternatives in lieu of safe supply, because that was really not in the mandate as set out in Government Motion 115. Thank you.
Excellent. Any further comment? All right, any other business that members wish to discuss at this time? Hearing and seeing none, we will go to section 7, date of next meeting. It'll happen at the call of the chair, and then we will move to adjournment. I would like to take the opportunity to thank everyone who has made a submission or presentation to the committee and for your contribution. If there's nothing else for the committee's consideration, I'll call the motion to adjourn. Does anybody like to adjourn? Excellent. Emily Allard moves that the June 7th, 2022 meeting of the Select Special Committee to examine safe supply be adjourned. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. That is carried, and we are adjourned.